Askreddit Asks defense lawyers of Reddit, what is it like to defend a client who has confessed to you that they're guilty of a violent crime? Do you still genuinely go out of your way to defend them?
Public defender here. I describe my job as part doctor, part tour guide. Like a doctor, sometime I can cure you, but sometimes I can just try to make it hurt less. Sometimes I can't do either. Then I'm a tour guide who makes sure that you understand what is happening, why it is happening, and try to give you as much choice in the matter as possible. At the very least, I sit next to you in court so you don't have to face the judge by yourself.
Also a PD, and I love this description of the job. Edit. First gold, gracias! Exclamation mark.
I used to give some judicial advice, not in the US, and I think you have the wrong idea about lawyers. It's not their job to prove someone is innocent. It is to defend the rights of the defendant. That means, for instance, that the procedures must be correct, and that the state does its job of building up a reasonable case. And if the person is guilty, he or she still needs a fair trial and a fair sentence.
This is what I came to say as well. When your client is guilty, you're no longer defending them. You're defending the system, because if the state can send a guilty person to jail without having enough evidence to build a solid case, they can send a not guilty person to jail with that same case.
The real question is, if your client confesses and then another innocent person gets convicted of that crime, what do you do?
Everyone deserves a defense. It's less about the defendant and more about making sure the state proves its case and can't railroad any defendants.
I feel like if more people understood this, there would be less hatred toward lawyers. I certainly did not think of it in this way. It's about holding the state accountable. I don't care if my guy did it. If we let the state lock him up without doing its job properly, that means next week it could be you, or me, or your mom that gets sent up for something we didn't do.
Can you come to my country and give this talk? Thank you for saying that. I find that a lot of people don't understand the concept that it's not a matter, oh sucks to be that guy. That guy can basically be anyone.
The point of a defense lawyer is not to get people off their sentence but to ensure the right to fair trial is upheld. Defense lawyers in that situation will be looking for leniency in sentencing to make sure the justice process doesn't become vindictive or vengeful.
I would have thought leniency would be the worst thing for defense. EDIT. Thanks for my first silver, kind stranger.
My criminal law professor said that he preferred guilty clients because he could do his best to ensure a fair procedure, but if he lost, he didn't sweat it. He took it a lot harder when he would lose a trial for a client that he thought was innocent.
100% agree with your professor. The emotional impact of losing a trial where you don't think your guy did it is pretty horrific.
Bobby What's-His-Face said something very similar in one of the early seasons of The Practice.
I'm late to the party, but one thing I've noticed is missing from many top comments is discussion of a lawyer's ethical obligations to the bar and to the court. If your client confesses his guilt to you, you cannot elicit false testimony from your client on the stand. You cannot knowingly present false information to the court, and if you become aware of that falsity after the fact, you have an obligation to correct the record. It can get complicated with things like your client testifying. You can choose not to call your client's friend to the stand if you know he will lie. But your client has an absolute right to testify. When you know that your client is guilty but he insists on testifying that he is not, you can have him give narrative testimony in which you, as his lawyer, do not participate. The standard is typically whether or not you know that something is untrue, not whether you strongly suspect it is.
I am a defense lawyer as well. TLDR, the criminal justice system is so oppressive. I don't care sir if a guilty client or two gets off scot-free. On the whole, it benefits society. There are two kinds of defense lawyers, the ones that live for getting an innocent client off, and those that live for getting a guilty client off. I am probably the latter kind. At the end of the day, most defense attorneys, especially those in more rural areas, believe the sentencing and fines for most offenses are outrageous. especially for indigent clients, and perpetuate a system of oppression of the disenfranchised. Marijuana possession, $600 2 days jail and substance abuse classes operating while intoxicated. Whether sitting in a car with the engine running because it's cold. Or legit drunk driving, easily $2,000 along with license suspension. Increased insurance costs and 2 days jail. Often sentences come with 1 to 2 years of probation, which drags on with 90 to 180 days in jail if they don't do well enough. Edit. Didn't expect this kind of response. Thanks for the lovely discussion.
I had a lawyer. I confessed to my grand theft auto to my lawyer, but I was with 4 others who did it. We spoke of plea options, but he wanted to wait and grant continuances to see how the other cases were built. I ended up getting off like a year and a half later. One guy pleaded guilty and got safe house. Another got probation and 2 of us got off completely. I never had to speak in court other than to ask for continuances when he was unable to make it. Then it just got dropped eventually. I was the only one who lawyered up immediately. The guy who got safe house fell for the "we have you on video" with no attorney present. There ended up being no video. If everyone had lawyered up, we probably wouldn't have got any time because we took a car for a joyride that had the keys in it, then ditched it somewhere else. Some fellow college students saw us in the vehicle and some guy stole some other guy's girlfriend, and that guy went to the cops with information since we were blabbermouths and told people we stole it, and that is what got us in questioning. This was like 15 years ago when I was in college.
An attorney has an ethical duty to represent the client zealously. That is true whether we know a client is guilty or not. Whether in court or during pre-trial proceedings, we will challenge and evaluate the state's evidence. True whether trying to get a client off all charges, looking to plea, or just figure out a defense strategy. Innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt is a heavy burden. It is a higher standard than guilty by clear and convincing evidence and by the preponderance of the evidence. The reason is simple: if the government is going to take a person's liberty or even their life, they had better not be overreaching. The burden is therefore on the prosecution. A defense attorney holds the prosecutor to that.
Not a defense lawyer, just a Fed clerk. But I'm in a docket with a heavy criminal docket. First off, you have to remember that most criminal proceedings end in a plea deal. So whether or not the client is guilty doesn't really matter. Your job as a defense lawyer isn't to prove they're innocent in that situation. It's to make sure the plea in an intelligent and informed way. Get the appropriate benefit for cooperating and don't get fucked over by the government. Same with sentencing disputes, the exact details surrounding what someone did can have major implications for sentencing, even if the basic fact that something illegal happened is already established. As for actual trials, as the defense attorneys in this thread have noted, the goal is to ensure that people are adequately represented. The ideal of the US legal system is that an adversarial process is the best way to establish the truth.
Although I am not an attorney, I have been represented by one for a speeding ticket that I was 100% guilty of. He wrote a trial by written declaration, which is available to people in California. And in the document he basically wrote asking if the street was tested for a speed test to make sure the speed limit was posted accurately, and he mentioned stuff regarding wanting records for the radar gun used. And poof. 3 weeks later got a letter in the mail saying dismissed. I was so happy. But I am not going to lie. I felt slightly guilty, still in the end.
Was the lawyer's fee less than the cost of the speeding ticket?
I think it's interesting that you see ethical questions like this for defense attorneys a lot. But not the obverse of that coin for the prosecutors who deliberately send innocent people to prison. That to me seems just mind-blowingly unethical. I guess my sympathies are more with those innocent people because I've seen several lives messed up that way. Some of people I care a lot about.
Do you know a lot of prosecutors who've deliberately sent innocent people to prison? Those would seem to be exceedingly rare. And also would clearly know the bad people when doing it. A more equivalent question is, why do you knowingly overcharge with the intent to plea down? Is that ethical? A lot of non-lawyers chiming in.
Pretty much every thread ever.
Lawyers are busy enough to not spend their days on Reddit speculating.
1. I'm so sick of this question. No one asks prosecutors how they sleep at night knowing they're convicting innocent people every day. Over 90% of cases resolve in pleas. Police are not over 90% accurate. Not even close. But poor people cannot spend over a month in jail waiting for a trial, and prosecutors know that and use it to get pleas. And no one is ever. How can you justify asking for a plea on a misdemeanor case when the person could never afford bail and has already lost their job, kids, house, etc.? 2. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. Criminal defense lawyers are the only Americans who day in and day out defend the Constitution. Prosecutors and police don't do that. The Constitution, after the adoption and incorporation of the 14th Amendment, is about protections from prosecutors and the police. They're the ones who violate it. And when they violate the Constitution, they dismiss it as a technicality. Criminal defense lawyers and maybe some judges are the only people in the US who fight for the Constitution on a daily basis and pay the consequences of it. They get portrayed as scumbags and liars, while the police, prosecutors, Congress people and senators, and the POTUS treat the Constitution like crap except when it suits their political purposes and are treated like heroes. It's crap. 3. The Constitution matters. It doesn't just matter for innocent people or rich people or white people. It's supposed to matter for all Americans and a lot of other folks too. Asking this question is basically asking why a defense attorney doesn't think someone deserves the constitutional rights, and if they feel bad C, they have the integrity to uphold their oath to defend the Constitution.
Everyone deserves constitutional protections. It doesn't matter what you've done. The Constitution isn't pick or choose. Defense lawyers, at least public defenders in the US, focus on that a lot of the time. Child rapists can be hard. But if you remember that the Constitution still applies, you can get through. It's a certain level of objective detachment. A defense lawyer makes sure the government isn't steamrolling you and is actually following procedure. Defense lawyers are a bulwark against government overreach. Or they should be if they're competent. Also, a lot of people who do violent crimes, I believe SCOTUS just held that pickpocketing is a violent crime for sentencing determination, so violent is a legal term that can, vary wildly to say the least, have fucked up lives. I know a guy who is severely schizophrenic who thought a woman was an angel robbing him, but it turned out he was mugging her with a gun and didn't realize it. He thought he was getting his money back from a thief. Public defenders, usually, try and focus on hooking people up with services and healing that they may not even know about. Also, there are loads of women specifically in prison for violent crimes who are there because they were defending themselves against their abuser and got sentenced. I personally know a woman who'd been in jail 20 years for killing her abuser who went after her child one night. Cyntoia Brown is another great example. These stories aren't the exception. People who commit violent crimes are still people. Not everyone is a raving heartless monster. Or Ted Bundy. Those are the exceptions, and even then it's still not the hardest thing to defend if, at least in the US, you frame it not as letting someone guilty get off. Surprise, most people do not just get off. I really hate when TV shows are like he got off on a technicality. Is the Fourth Amendment a technicality? Is that really what you're saying right now?
If they admit guilt, you have an ethical duty to not make false representations to the court. You have to work your best with the laws. You have to make some sort of defense. You can argue that the law is unconstitutional, that he is insane, etc., etc. But you can't lie and say he is innocent. Frequently, I do not ask outright if someone did it or not. You can sort of tell. For example, you can ask, would you be willing to submit to a polygraph test about that? And if they say no, you can be pretty sure they have something to hide, unless they have another reason to not submit to one. However, most of the time, we are not arguing someone is innocent. We are arguing that the defendant should get a lighter sentence and that there are mitigating factors. There are some people I will never defend, namely child molesters, because A, I hate them too much to zealously defend them, which is a conflict of interest. And B, if I did zealously defend them and get them a slap on the wrist, I'd hate myself for it.
The thing about robust legal defense is it serves a bigger purpose than just keeping one guy out of jail. The state has enormous power to deprive people of their rights, freedom, or even lives. The people writ large need assurance that the state can protect them from crime, but also need assurance that the power of the state is not exercised capriciously or arbitrarily. It isn't so much that we need people to try their hardest to set guilty people free. It's that innocent people need to know that someone holds the state's feet to the fire and ensures that it punishes no one it cannot prove to a very high standard actually did the thing he is accused of. We need confidence that we cannot be hauled off in the night and subjected to a kangaroo court for something we didn't do. Or our justice system becomes as big a threat as the criminals it is supposed to protect us from.
Not a lawyer, my law teacher in high school was a former defense lawyer. She quit lawyering because she defended, and won, a case where she knew her client was guilty for killing a child. Greatest law teacher ever.
I've never really understood the hate for defense lawyers. They are a vital part of the justice system, making sure the prosecutor is doing their damn job properly. You know who are the true bottom feeders of society? Fucking real estate agents.
Camel traders and carpet sellers shouldn't have a worse reputation than real estate agents. When I started my first week of medical school, one of the dean came to chat with my class. He related a story regarding his first day in medical school ages before. His class was required to sit at their desk and contemplate something his professor had written on the chalkboard. Primum non nocere, which in Latin means first, to do no harm. This, of course, is part of the Hippocratic Oath. He told us that he felt deeply moved by this concept. Later that day, he ran into a close friend, whom he describes as being despondent and nearly in tears. His friend had started law school that same day, and was also required to contemplate something written on the chalkboard. Apparently, the message written was the practice of law has nothing to do with justice. The law student informed the dean that an attorney's job was to do whatever was required and permitted to protect and defend his client. I still remember that lecture. It left a deep impression in me. No questions, just sharing.
A defense lawyer's job is to make sure the prosecution is doing their job correctly.
I'm a forensic social worker. AKA, I work in prison hospitals for those who are extremely ill. I do have a few clients who I think are innocent despite jury verdict, and sometimes I have to take the stand as an expert witness to describe their mental illness. One person confessed to raping over 20 children, and as an expert witness I had to defend him, because of my client laws. I couldn't use anything he told me in trial because of the HIPAA law. On the other hand, I have had innocent people on parole where I've gone balls to the wall as their social worker, discussing their character and who they are as a person. I've had a lot of people claim they're guilty of crimes, but at the end of the day it's my duty to help them figure out what's going on inside their brains. A privilege all of us should be entitled to. I kill more people to protect them. Annalise Keating and Co.
Good show.
Dear public defenders, thank you. Love the public.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and above all, have an excellent day, you wonderful people.